So we're going to move on now to another colleague from the Bodleian, Nick Millea, who, as Richard said, is a cartographic treasure. He is map librarian at the Bodleian, and he is an honorary fellow and Bartholomew Globe winner at the Royal Scottish Geographical Society, chair of the British and Irish Committee for Map Information and Cataloguing Systems, and a founding member of the Oxford Seminars in Cartography. So Nick knows about maps. So he's going to talk to us about the Gough Map. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Judith. It's lovely to be here. I'd like to thank the Sunderland collection and Factum for making this all possible. And what we've got today is the opportunity to drill down and look at one map in particular. Now, my grandiose title for this session, Spectacular, a digital exploration of the Gough Map. Let me begin by just defining spectacle or spectacular. There are numerous definitions in the Oxford English Dictionary. So, first one is of the nature of a spectacle or show, striking or imposing as a display. Secondly, that which appeals to the eye. Thirdly, pertaining to, characteristic of spectacles or shows. And finally, a spectacular display, also a spectacle in the form of a radio or television programme, entertainment, etc., produced on a lavish or spectacular scale. So let's see if we can explore this by way of one particular map. What I'm going to talk about is the Gough Map of Britain. You can see from this image dates from around about 1400. I'll explain more about that later. As an image in its own right, it is a spectacle, I would argue. Very colourful, lots of reds, greens. And what else do we know about it? It was bequeathed to the Bodleian in 1809 by Richard Gough, hence its name. But it's a very important artefact in terms of the relationship between the Bodleian and Factum. We first worked with Factum way back in 2015. I think it's thanks to Jerry Brotman for introducing Adam to us, when we had what was called a Science Week. This building was being renovated, and way down in the basement, we found a room where we were able to do 3 different scientific projects on the Gough Map. We were able to do a 3D scan, thanks to Factum. We did some Raman spectroscopy, and we also did some hyperspectral imagery. So this started to build a core scientific research team. What could we do with the map? What could it tell us about the map? And this evolved via a number of articles into a research grant from the Leverhulme Trust, which ran for 3 years. And because of COVID, we were able to extend it for a 4th year. And what we hope will result, or what we know will result, is a monograph to be published by Brill, hopefully the end of next year. So there's lots of work going on, but just look at the map first. I'm going to zoom in a little closer. We'll find out more about it. What can we say? Oops, I'll get the hang of this soon. Its earliest parts date to around about 1400. It's a palimpsest. It's a work in production. What you see on the screen is here to the left-hand side, Scotland. East is at the top, England, Wales down here, and then we have Norway, Denmark, Sluis in the Netherlands, Calais, and Ireland across the bottom. In terms of size, it's about 115 centimetres this way, 56 centimetres that way. And if you want to look at it in more detail, for those of you who are in the audience here in Oxford today, you can go and see the Factum facsimile, which is outside where you registered over lunch or the coffee breaks. So, it's one of the earliest maps to show Britain in a geographically recognisable form. In terms of what it's made of, you can see there's a line down here. To the left of that line is the carcass of a lamb. To the right, it's a sheep. We've seen the map, we've seen the periphery. It's got rivers, over 200 rivers, over 650 toponyms. It is a real geographical map. We also have mountains. There are even animals on there. and woodland. There's a huge amount of geography. And here we see the map being scanned downstairs in 2022 on the Sunderland. John, I think, has described this as the largest original to have been captured by the Archeox project. So that was when it was all captured. And I'd like to thank John because he has supplied quite a lot of the images in the presentation. And the next one is going to be more of an animation. So let's just watch and see what happens here. There is the Gough Map, and we're going to zoom in on Northampton. And then you can see the work. What emerges? You get this 3D surface. So I'll keep that running for a while whilst I speak. So it's this transformation. And when you first look at it, and bear in mind that the Gough Map team has been looking at the Gough Map for a long, long time. To see it in this different grey, almost lunar surface, it does look very different. But what's it telling us? And I'm going to explain more about that because the information that we've found, thanks to our partnership with Factum and with Archeox, has been absolutely groundbreaking. So here we see a close-up of what's the Humber estuary on the east coast. You can see the main settlement there. This is Hull, and that's Beverley. The Humber is named, that's Grimsby there. So just bear that in mind. So you've got a good 3D angled view of the map, and it transforms into this. There's an awful lot of information that we see there which may not instantly resonate with the audience here. Notice these prick marks here and here. These are key to one aspect of the research we've been doing on the map. The map is covered in around 4,000 of these holes, which tend to mark the positions of towns and cities as effectively, this is evidence that the map was copied from an earlier map. The earlier map doesn't survive. And I'm going to explain this further because really this is the big reveal from today's presentation. Before we go into the big reveal in full, here is another bit of work that John was doing, which was the copper plate of the Gough Map, which was created in the late 18th century. And this is important to the story. So there is a copper plate, the plan being to create a facsimile. More evidence from the copper plate. So bear this in mind. You can see the map is in reverse because it's the copper plate. There we go again. So this is the new evidence we have. I'd like to thank my colleague, our Gough Map research assistant, Damien Bove, for a number of photographs which he's supplied, because the next set of photos are images which predate Factum. So the top left, we have a high-res image, standard photograph, a conservator's photograph, bottom left, and there's a bit of hyperspectral imagery, the long, thin element on the right. It's all very interesting, but the Factum imagery has brought all this together and given us so much more concrete information to work with. So all three of these images show evidence of pricking, which is very important as far as the Gough Map is concerned. We knew about the pricking before the work with Factum. What the Factum work has done is given us so much more information to play with. And what we need to bear in mind is when we first did that scanning back in 2015 downstairs, Factum took a scan of the map and they said, do you want us to do the reverse? And we thought, do we want to? It took a long time. I think it probably took a day to do the scan. It was a long, long job. And we decided, yes, why not? We had the time. We did the reverse. And that was a really good decision. Because by capturing the reverse, we could learn a lot more about the prick marks, and I will explain how that all comes together. So this is what the pricking does. The yellow dots on Damien's slide there show or illustrate the standard form of settlements on the Gough map. There are hundreds of settlements looking like the one there on the top left, the small house. And more grandiose settlements we can see in the terms of the castle, the church with the steeple, the church with the tower. And you can see the dots highlighted in yellow there. And these dots are the guidance, the guideline, if you like, to creating the map and locating each settlement in the correct place on the map's surface. So the lower images, the Kirby Lonsdale and the Cumbernauld ones, show where the image for the settlement has been pricked once and then the sheets are slipped and it's therefore been done again. So you can see there are the black circles and the white circles with the black outline. And it's one of the strongest arguments against the pricking being done to copy from the Gough map. This is evidence to show that pricking has been done to the Gough map. And I'll give you an example of how that works. We'll look at Edinburgh. That is Edinburgh. There are the original yellow dots, and you'll see they don't match precisely. But then they slide across, and all of a sudden, Edinburgh can be recreated and painted onto the map in the right place. So that's one way of looking at things. What I also want to look at is a number of cartouches in Scotland. Scotland, when I was talking about the map being a palimpsest, a work in progress, the Scottish part of the map hasn't changed from when the map was first created. So what we see in Scotland and the area north of Hadrian's Wall is the earliest part of the Gough map from around about 1400. And we can see here that the cartouches are both pricked. You can see the prick marks in the corners, but it's also scored as well. So similar to what John was showing earlier, you can see the lines, the bounding boxes have already been scored onto the surface there. And that only appears on the map north of the wall. So to confirm what's going on with this idea of transferring information from one map to another, over the years, the thought has been these prick marks must have come when the Gough map was used to create facsimiles. And here's an example of one of the Gough map facsimiles, which was created by Bezier for his 1780 facsimile. So facsimile is probably not quite the right word, but it's a slightly smaller version of the Gough map. The two quotations are interesting. There's W.B. Sanders writing in 1870 says, "From Gough making no allusion to it in his account, I suppose they were made by Bezier while engraving it." And Ed Parsons in the audience. Ted Parsons, writing in 1958, said, "Since there is no mention of the pricking by Gough, it is probable that it was done by Bezier when preparing his reproduction for Gough's British topography." So there had been this general consensus of opinion that the prick marks on the Gough map were made to generate new facsimiles. Damien's research into the pricking, though, he's been able to eliminate all the makers of the facsimiles of the Gough map from the responsibility of creating these holes. And this is the technique that we think was used. This is a slide created by Damien, where we have original P. That's a name that we as the Gough Map research team used for the predecessor map. And so what we're seeing here is the copier copying through the original map, penetrating that original map, and a mark being made on the surface below, which is the Gough Map. That's what's going on. And this is what we got. These are locations where there are pinholes. So we've got 2,123 pinholes. This was a number of years ago, and Damien has created the map for us. This is interesting as well in terms of its geographical distribution, because it helps explain why this map is a work in progress. And it's this part of the country up here, so East Anglia and Kent, where there are very few prick marks. And we are of the opinion that this is where the map was revised at a later date. It was known when the copy was made that there was better geographical information than on the original map. And so that is fresh cartography made after the rest of the map. So no copying was extracted from there. We hint at this in an article which was written in Imago Mundi in 2017. We'll be explaining it a lot more in our book with Brill. And here's another take on the same story. It does look a lot like an election map in many ways, with the reds and blues and a few yellows dotted around. But the reds are settlements which have been pricked. The blues are unpricked. The yellows we're not so sure about. It is quite challenging at times. But again, you'll see that concentration of settlements in East Anglia and Kent, and it's a far more dense concentration of settlements as well. Likewise, Cornwall and the West Country, which appears to have been constructed later. And let's see some action involving measurements of pinholes. This, the work that John is able to do has been absolutely amazing. And that's measuring the contours and the depth of every single hole that we've asked him to look at. So that's absolutely amazing stuff. And I want to focus on Bolton Castle in Yorkshire. This slide shows what can be done using Archeox. And you see all sorts of different views, oblique views here, profile of a hole. It all gets very mappy, almost looks like a topographic map in its own right. And this has enabled us to try and identify the holes, the sizes of holes, and some of these we're not even sure whether they are real, genuine prick holes or they're holes as part of the surface material of the sheep's skin. And a couple more local examples. We go to Winchester now, and just to show you three pricked but inked in crosses, one large and two small. So there is Winchester. You'll see the yellow is showing using the prick marks where there should be a cross, which doesn't appear. And likewise, there's a second one there, which is red one. And a third green one there. So there's no obvious holes, just small indentations. So this is all part of us trying to work out what's going on in the creation of the map. Likewise at Chichester, a large prick cross is in evidence. There you see, but it doesn't actually appear on the map. There's a much smaller cross below that yellow circle on the left-hand side. So has it erased? Has it been erased? Has it faded? We're also showing some multispectral imagery, which gives a hint that there might have been a fleur-de-lis on there at some stage. So there's all sorts going on. And speaking to Damien about this, he now says we have a definitive answer about the pricking. The science didn't uncover the answer. What they showed was the red, green, blue imaging, but it gave us evidence to confirm our suspicions, being able to confidently say on account of the pricking that the Gough map is a copy solves the conundrum. The paleography says around about 1400, but much of the content says late 13th to mid 14th century. The date range the map was given in the 19th and 20th centuries. All of a sudden, that now makes sense. And it makes sense because of the evidence supplied to us by the Archeox project. There are other ways, other things to look at. This isn't Archeox work, but this is work which we did with colleagues from Rochester Institute of Technology in the US, who also came to Oxford to help us. And the yellow arrow there indicates the shipwrecked mariner. Some poor soul floating around off a wrecked ship in the North Sea. But what David Messenger at Rochester Institute of Technology was able to highlight this. So the one on the left is a true colour one. The one on the right, he's pulled out different colour bands so we can see so much more detail. And you can start to see the face of this poor chap. But look at the detail on the belt. Here, the clothes that he's wearing, the hands look a bit scary, and an anguished look on this chap's face. So this is yet more and more of the fun and games that working with technology can help us with. But I want to finish by looking at future aspirations. When this particular event was proposed, we were starting to talk about work on the Sheldon tapestry maps. It's a set of 4 tapestry maps based on English counties, created around about 1590. Most of the surviving tapestries, although not all of them, are actually here in the Bodleian. And when you got your coffee, you receive your copy in front of the Oxfordshire tapestry map. So go back and have another look at it. And they are spectacular visual delights. I'm sure you would agree. Here's an extract from the Worcestershire tapestry. And again, you'll be able to see an image of the Worcestershire tapestry if you go and look at the facsimile of the Gough Map. Certainly those of you in the audience, those of you watching online, I'm sorry you're going to miss out on this. But this is the Worcestershire tapestry, a bit of it. To give you an idea, it's about 6 metres across, about 4 metres high. It's a massive thing. The tapestries were all made to go in Weston House, which is between Chipping Norton and Stratford-on-Avon. So it's in South Warwickshire, not very far away from where we are today. The house no longer survives. That's another story. But this is what remains of Oxfordshire. You can see there's not much of it left. But what does remain is fantastic. City of Oxford is here. This is central London. And we go all the way out to the Cotswolds. This is what it could look like. There are 2 strips of tapestry here. These belong to the V&A in London. We would very much like to incorporate these. The background is the mapping of Christopher Saxton, which was about 15 years earlier, and all the cartographic imagery, information on the tapestries has pretty much been taken from Saxton. So the plan is that we can somehow try and recreate that tapestry and all 4 tapestries. They're fantastic. For those of a geographical bent, this is incredibly frustrating because Warwickshire and Gloucestershire have east at the top, Worcestershire and Oxfordshire have north at the top. So that's fun and games. Quite a bit of Gloucestershire is in private hands. The Warwickshire one is owned by Warwickshire County Council. We have agreement from all parties that they want to be part of this project, so that's really exciting. So that brings me pretty much to the end, but I just want to finish with this image. This is the Gough Map facsimile in action, and apologies to Alex who's in the audience, he knew this was coming. It's a 3-dimensional facsimile of the original has been made, allowing researchers the opportunity to study the map without the risk of the original being damaged. I have to say the first time this map was presented in this building, a colleague came up to me and said, "What's the Gough Map doing out of its case?" It's that good. It truly is that good. And I'd like to mention comments from a colleague, Duke van Netten, who mentioned that a facsimile is a real thing, but it's also not the real thing. It's much more about people encountering medieval maps and using technology nowadays to provide or facilitate completely new ways of encountering maps. And this is true. It's still spectacular. Of the nature of spectacle or show, striking and imposing as a display. Yeah, look at the faces around there. They're all getting stuck in. That it appeals to the eye. Of course it does. Pertaining to characteristic of spectacles or shows. I think so. And a spectacular display produced on a lavish or spectacular scale. Certainly it is. This has been a real game changer for us. It completely changes the way we present the story of the Gough Map to students and people visiting the library. I can't thank Factum enough for it. And on that, I'd like to thank you as the audience for listening, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.